I specifically look at things like agency, a person's ability to be autonomous and to make decisions regardless of their environment, memory, and metacognition. But the AI model I would put in the realm of like relatively predictable compared to a human, and you can control its behavior. How do you control the behavior? A harness. A harness is the thing that you wrap around the AI that the human interacts with. When you're engaging with the AI, tell it to teach you, right? So teach me, don't tell me is the language. Teach me, don't tell me, right? For adults. Don't be afraid to use that term as an adult. Don't be afraid to like lean in, like roll up your sleeves and actually like dive in.
Marcus Sawyerr, welcome you to AI and Recruiting, the show where they break down how AI is transforming hiring, leadership, and the future of work. Expect real talk, smart tools, and bold conversations with the people shaping what's next. Let's get into it.
MJ, how you doing?
Great, Marcus. How are you?
I'm doing really, really good. So the reason we're doing this podcast is we're just continuing our discussion from the green room in San Francisco, right? That's all we're doing.
That was a great chat. I actually loved chatting with you. We went like super deep, super fast. You're like, so MJ, let's talk about the secrets of the universe. Nice to meet you.
We did go really deep. So I knew that there was going to be a sequel. And so I wanted to invite you onto our podcast just to have the discussion. And I think I don't know, maybe this is me being a little bit elaborate, but thinking if we thought our conversation was decent, then maybe other people might like it as well and they get some value from it.
Yeah, I'm sure. It was great. We did cover a lot of topics. But the truth is that like we're in this time right now where all the stuff that we're poking at is really affecting everything and everyone. And so it's actually very rare that I would go into a room and someone would say, oh, I have no idea what AI is and AI hasn't touched my life. 3 years ago, by the way, that would have been the case, but not today.
And I also found it very rare. And that's, I think, the power of like the West Coast and San Francisco and from Seattle is like you have a discussion and everybody knows something pretty in depth about AI and has a perspective, and then we actually get into debate in a green room. So that was a good discussion. Well, just for those listening in, I'd love it if you could just share a little bit about what you currently do and also how you got there. Because from my research, it seems to me that you started and have always been in the medical field, which is also going to be another important breakthrough field for everything that concerns humanity. So I'd love it if you could share with the audience, those listening into our conversation, our green room conversation. What is it that you're doing right now, Michael? What's your official job and how are you spending your time?
Official. I don't know that anything in life is ever official, Marcus. But I'm the AI Innovation Officer at Microsoft in the Office of the CTO, and our focus is on looking at the short and long-term horizon for where we're going. Right? Like we're not tagged to a very specific thing that we have to look at, but really like what is our intuition and why? And all of us are very actively using the tools, pushing the frontier. If we can't do something, we do it. We find a way to get it done. And so, you could call us like meta harness engineers. Right. So I just built an app over a couple of day period because I wanted to push myself to understand the level of like how finished could it really be in terms of security, hardening, logging into things, etc. And it got to the point where I was able to look back at the multiple tools I was using and seeing how I was operating the tools. And we haven't really done that in a long time from a society perspective. So I specifically look at things like agency, a person's ability to be autonomous and to make decisions regardless of their environment, memory, and metacognition, like the ability to think about about thinking. And what does that mean biologically? What does it mean digitally? How do we compare the difference between digital and organic systems? So that's my current day to day. And as you know, I do sometimes go out and chat with people about where we're going and how we feel about the future and what do we really want from the future.
And it's reminding me now in terms of where we stepped in and just thinking about thinking, like, because that's actually all I think about, which can be lonely, right? And I was actually thinking about this the other day. That used to be the definition of insanity somewhat, not the full definition, because one part of it was doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. But they would say, are you crazy talking to yourself or thinking to yourself or reflecting, right? So that's what theys would say. And yeah, I think, so you mentioned some terms that you and I are familiar with, you're super familiar with, you teach on it, you teach at Stanford as well, and harness engineer, right? What is a harness for those listening in? So we have an audience that is typically C-level executives, staffing and recruiting, human capital in that space. But how would you define a harness today? And also, maybe we can start to dive into it as we're probably up. Well, where is this going?
Sure. So the way there's an interesting triangulation that's happening right now. Let's start there, right? Okay. Two parts of that you're very familiar with because everyone's familiar with the human and the AI model. Yep. So the human is actually quite chaotic. Parts of the human are predictable, but the vast majority of inputs are not predictable. And then you have an AI model. And these AI models today are not like the AI models of yesterday. So all the way from like the late 1930s up until a few years ago, they were deterministic predictions. And so you could kind of rely on where they would go. And we're at the point now where we're in non-deterministic world. You can't predict the exact outcome or why it specifically gets to an outcome. We're getting closer, but we're not there. And but the AI model I would put in the realm of like relatively predictable compared to a human, and you can control its behavior. How do you control the behavior? A harness. A harness is the thing that you wrap around the AI that the human interacts with. So you could call that Copilot. You could call it ChatGPT. You could call it Claude. You could call it Claude Code. And the harness has a set of instructions. Those instructions will guide the AI's behavior, and in some cases, let it go very, very, very long running. In some cases, very short, or give it a sense of like a personality of how it interacts with you. And so inside that harness is where you're effectively coding your opinions for how you want the AI to behave with you.
Yeah. I suppose the insights that you shared, that definition, historically, may have been seen as guardrails, right? And I think there's components to that, obviously. But at EQ, what we've been building has been an environment that allows people to create their own digital workers, which in essence, and we've never used the word harness on a platform, is creating multiple harnesses all at once because you can choose any model. It's model agnostic. Use Copilot, use Gemini, and then you add the information to it. So I think it's important for people to understand kind of how it's dressed up. We dress it up as a digital worker, but ultimately it's the technical term is a harness, right?
That's right.
And so through that learning, or those learning, so you mentioned about building an application, and just yesterday, something that's been bugging me for a while, and I had to do something about it, is just this whole terminology of AEO and GEO. So instead of SEO, right, agentic engine optimization and GEO, and that's for the audience and listening in. And so I started to build an AEO factory, and this factory had to be grounded in content that was unique and related to the use cases that we develop inside of our organization. And to your point, just going through that whole process again and again, end to end. And I have to sell myself on this because my job as part of EQ is not to keep building these, to sell myself. I need to do go to market. Okay, this is go to market because it's AEO and GEO. But talk a little bit about the learnings that you get as somebody who's so senior at one of the largest companies in the world, but actually still gets hands-on. So you're rolling up your sleeves and doing something. And I think people misunderstand that from those who are outside of our industry that you actually have to know how to do the thing at this stage, because otherwise you're going to get left behind?
Yeah, that is a very deep and also great topic to go into, right? Because I think one of the things that our kids are experiencing that we didn't is this idea of agency erosion or skill erosion, right? At such a young age. So like, yes, I had a TV in our house growing up as a kid, but it wasn't like we were spending all of our time with TV. We were outdoors. We were learning new things. We were messing around, right? Like we were figuring out like life.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. Making mistakes, like doing all those things that friction that brings growth. And we're now exposed to a friction reduction machine.
Mm-hmm.
And so every single time you interact with this machine, it doesn't matter whether it's a digital labor or something else, your ability to grow in that new skill actually might not exist in the way that it used to before. And so we have to find ways to grow. Like my older kids ask me all the time, like, can we stop learning to code? It's obviously a solved problem now. Like, okay, so maybe in a couple of years, it'll be 100% perfect. But like, why do we need to learn how to code? And I would just tell them to please get back to work. Like you're lucky that you have that exercise to grow the tissue in your skull, so that you can actually learn to think and to be creative and to solve problems, right? Like, okay, some people have sticks and stones and some people have syntax and code, but you're going to be at a place where you're going to be seeking ways to grow yourself, right? So just because my mind might be more clinically oriented doesn't necessarily mean that I shouldn't learn how to orchestrate some of the largest systems on earth. Like I don't see a conflict from one to the other. And so I see, and the same goes in the reverse. Like if I have a patient that comes into my office, for example, and they say, just tell me what to do, I would wholeheartedly reject that.
And I think it's important for people to know you're actually a doctor. Outside of all this innovation stuff that you're doing as well. And to your point, if you have a patient that comes in to your office, there's an expectation that you're going to have somewhat of a rounded view on how to like fix things, not fix everything, but at least an understanding, right? And so thinking in ecosystems is also super important for those. And you mentioned a term, and I'm kind of paraphrasing somewhat, but deskilling.
Yeah.
Deskilling is taking place today, both voluntary and involuntary. And I suppose there has to be an awareness of what's actually gonna happen, and also how you continue to sharpen. So you talk about our children, and we'll talk about the children's book that you've created as well. But why don't we talk a little bit about deskilling? Because much of the conversation has been about upskilling and reskilling.
Yeah.
So love your opinion on that.
Sure. So upskilling, reskilling, cross-skilling. I've heard all the skillings. I've used all the skillings. I'm not a Debbie Downer on the skillings, right? Like I want people to actually do that. But a few years ago when I saw what AI was doing, and the fact that you will have a team that will go for years without actually hard coding anything, it should be clear to anyone that you'll lose the skill to do that. And the same thing in a clinical scenario, right? Like if you're using all digital tools to collect blood pressure, your sensitivity to being able to do that manually goes away. It doesn't mean your skill is totally gone, but you're going to have skills that erode, and that's natural. And so I do envision a world where a lot of ideas or technical syntax, for example, will erode, and that will be natural. Now, my argument there is that it should be intentional. Right. So when I introduced this term several years ago of downskilling, and people looked at me like I literally had 6 heads and 45 arms. And so, I think now people are actually feeling it. And so because they're feeling it, they're like, oh, that's the word for that thing that I don't do really so much anymore, right? Because I'm used to doing things in a whole different way now. And so my argument here is simply be intentional about your loss of skill so that you can replace it with something else that is more important at the moment. And just know somewhere in the back of your mind that this is the first time in all of human history where we have the ability to hand off planning and orchestration tasks to a machine.
Yeah.
And that will do something to our mind physically. And so that's just something to hold on to.
Yeah, and I've noticed it personally as well, just kind of taking a break away from the screens for a period of time. We were away and was nowhere near a screen, turned my email off and switched everything off. And it gives me the ability to reflect, and you remember who you were and how you used to think, because I'm thinking about the thinking. But one of the things this reminds me of a little bit is after you do anything that's super intense, and let's take a sport, for instance, something that was introduced following a sport was a cool down, and it's to remove the lactic acid from your muscle so you can go again. And it was deliberate. It wasn't that you started to slow down at the end of the game. It was like you deliberately do the cool down to get ready for the next opportunity. And I think people are struggling somewhat to see what that next opportunity is. But this is part of the discussion I think you and I have been having, which is if you have the ability to have an awareness of what your cognition is impacting, whether it's internally, externally, and within your ecosystem, you can start to create a world that you can move into. But if you don't have the awareness, you're literally doing less than you thought you would do with AI or anything like that, because you're not thinking about the thinking on how it's getting done. Would be some way that I would like look through that lens as well. I don't know what your perspective is, but that's kind of how I feel it coming across.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about like muscle growth that happens like overnight, where you can like reconsolidate and your body adjusts to the breakdown of muscle that you're doing in order to get it to grow, right? So your mind is also doing those really important tasks. Its environmental stimuli have been reduced, and you have a dedicated period. So there's nothing to say you can't like daydream and invoke that, right?
Yep.
To be able to enable that cool down. I think what you don't want to do is be in a place where you're exposed to so much stimuli for so much of the day that your mind has no ability to actually like think. And this is an interesting thing, because I had this conversation with my son, my 13-year-old. I don't remember if we spoke about it, but I think we did. You know, he loves the AI. It's like all the kids do, actually. But my 13-year-old is interacting constantly with it, and he loves thinking of ideas and pushing on it. And then he was telling me about it, and I said, honey, I'm like, listen, regardless of whether it's a human or an AI, think before you ask, because if you don't, the AI's thinking will become your thinking.
Yeah.
Right. And if you don't create the habit to think and to cool down and to do those things, you'll lose the ability to do that. And this is totally not a new thing. If you go back all the way to Aristotle, right? Aristotle said you become just through just acts. You become brave through brave acts. You habitualize yourself to doing the right thing and to growth. And so it's a question of what your intention and ambition is. That's what will drive it.
I think this is where we started the discussion. Obviously, we were on a panel as well, which we hadn't even mentioned. But what resonated with me was similar with my 7-year-old. So he is actually the designer of the graphics and design for the newsletter that will go out where the podcast goes out. And I said to him, look, I want to make some money. I said, okay, let's figure this out. What can you do? And he's turned and I'm like, you're pretty good at drawing, right? I said, yeah, great. Well, all those things that you have in your imagination, sketch them out. And he started to sketch some things out. And I said, well, do you know how to draw a cup? He's like, of course, Daddy. Like, crazy. I said, do you know how to draw a lion? Yes. Do you know how to draw systems thinking? Well, all right, let me see what that means to me. So he started to draw systems thinking. And then so what I would then do is take that drawing, I'd then plug it into a model, and then we would polish it with AI. So you'll see in our Substack, and to be very transparent, I've use some like kind of straight AI sketches, and our Substack gets like 20 likes. On his, he's got 400 or 500 likes. And I'm like, hang on a minute. It's because of part of it's because of that process. And I think I'd love you to comment on that, but also this will switch gears into, you've also created a children's book, because one of the things our audience will have, especially those listening, a lot of them will have kids, right? And a lot of them hopefully have been kids. We hope that at some point in time, and they don't forget that. And the guidance that our children need today and also tomorrow is somewhat changing. The principles and the foundations, to your point with Aristotle, are similar, but the guidance in this environment is evolving. Can you talk a little bit about what inspired you to create your own children's book, not just for your children, but just generally through thinking as well?
First of all, it's only you that would think about asking him to draw something like that. So that's an amazing thing. I hope parents learn from you. Talk about growth targets. You're like, I know you can go to the store, but I really want you to go to the moon.
Step by step.
Just build the rocket. You can do it.
Exactly.
So fantastic. You heard how I kind of interact with on my 13-year-old side. When all this was really breaking out, my daughter was she's 6 now. She was born a week after pandemic shutdowns, and grew up talking to remote controls and Alexas and Siris and everything else. And so, she's at an age right now, which I don't think most parents realize, where the machines can do somewhere between 90 and 100% of everything that she needs and asks, including buy things, including turn on the TV, including, bring up a video or a show. And her expectations are very high, right? So when it fails her, she's not comfortable with it, and she expresses her discomfort. So, and a lot of these tools, they will just give her information or give her answers to things. And so I tell her, when you're engaging with the AI, tell it to teach you, right? So teach me, don't tell me.
Sure.
Is the language, right, for her. And she's been constantly, my kids are always asking me hey, when you're going to this university or that university or this part of Microsoft, what do you actually talk about? What are the questions that they ask you? And it's harder than you think to communicate to a room of PhDs and get that down to something that a 6-year-old would understand. So I thought, hey, I'm experienced. I could totally do that. Naturally. Fake news. I totally couldn't. And so it took me many months to actually create language that my kid would understand. And then I initially drew up some sketches, which I had AI polish for me and create. And that formed itself into a book. It was inspired by the Giving Tree. It's called The Giving Mind. And it's a 4-part series. I got one of them out the door already. It was way more work than I thought. The Giving Mind is about curiosity and wonder. The Giving Heart is about empathy and connection. And the Giving Hands are about science and making. And the Giving Feet are about purpose and journey. And it starts out with once there were humans. And, my daughter kind of hit the nail on the head, right? When we worked on this together, her first question to me was Papa, aren't we also humans? And I said to her, of course, honey, but a different kind of human, right? If I took your phone away, would it make you sad? And she said, yes. And I told her about how I grew up and the things that I did when I was her age. And, I said to her, you're going to be the kind of human that you want to be. I just want you to always know that it is in your choice and it is not someone else's choice that will turn you into that human. And so the Giving Mind and this Giving series is about the relationship that we're building with AI and the intention that we're feeling and the emotions that we're feeling. You haven't actually seen this, Marcus, but the next book, The Giving Heart, one of the scenes, for example, is a conversation between a young child who spills paint on the floor and, their robot buddy. And the robot buddy says, hey, I can clean up that paint spill. And the child says, but I see a dragon, right? And it's hard for the robotic personality to understand the beauty in the mistake and the beauty in what might not even be a mistake. And so there's a lot of these conversations basically. And I wanted to give parents some words and teachers to be able to talk about this.
Look, I think also being in the mindset of let's say a child, for want of a better term, means that you have to think back to what it was like to be a child, or create those environments or spaces in order to do so. And as you spend more time with children, so spending time with your kids, remind you of that as well as like not being so serious. We were out looking at a pool the other day. So we were away on vacation, and across from like the balcony, we could see the pool. And I've looked at this pool every day. And my daughter, 6 years old, she goes, "Oh, yeah, me and Tate know that's in the shape of a dinosaur." And I was like, "What?" So I'm looking at it and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I see it as well." I was like, "How did you guys see that way before me?" And it's the mindset, right? So there's like, there's almost like bias, inherent bias of like imagination bias, for want of a better, which is something that we need, right? We need to have a bias towards imagination versus a bias towards the answers, right?
Yeah, totally. Like that creativity and wonder. Like even as a kid, I used to like look up at the stars and look up at the clouds and understand. And I don't see that. So you asked one question that I actually didn't answer. I'll answer for you now. Why did I publish that? So initially it was just notes between me and my kid, and my wife and I were chatting about like the conversation, right? And one of the things that both of us noticed is that all my kids were asking questions of AI that we asked of our closest friends, teachers, mentors, parents. And we discovered that the parenting was being transferred off of us without permission. And so we needed to have a conversation with our kids, and that's what led to like just getting it out there.
Yeah, I've seen that as well and noticed it, and we try and do more because I think one of the things. So our daughter's a similar age, she's 6, and our son at the time, he spent a lot of time with us during COVID, and so we were deeply parenting every day, all the time, because I'd have calls and he'd see stuff and he'd go back and forth, and that was actually felt more natural, and our daughter saw that as well. And then when they went off to school, and maybe I wouldn't have been so perspective. I know you've got, I think you have 3. Do you have 3 kids or
four? Four. Yeah.
4. Okay, yeah, I knew it was more than me. And it's like once you start to get to that amount, you probably start to notice things. And we really started to notice the type of information that was being spread, and the fact that it's being said, but parenting starts at home, doesn't start at school, right? And school is an extension of that. And maybe that's the same way to think about AI, right? Like the learning doesn't start with AI, right? It starts with you and where you want to go. So being really clear on who you are, your principles, what drives you forward, and having purpose, and then using the AI to help you to get there, I think is super important, super interesting. So we talked about a lot. We talked about we talked about cognition. We talked about children's books. We've talked about somewhat the deskilling. We talked about where things may be going from a kid's perspective. But let's maybe dive into business for a second. One of the things that everybody's trying to think about is where is AI at large going to have the most impact when it comes to jobs, when it comes to creation of new opportunities and new business, from your perspective, based on what you're seeing?
Sure. So, I think when you think about a problem, let's just give a basic problem. Like I need to manufacture something. I need to create a car, and I want to create lots of cars, or, a stapler, and I want to manufacture lots of staplers. So what do? You create a machine that can stamp those out. Right. And so I think the way that we were thinking about AI for the last few years was very much like post-industrial revolution way of thinking. It was, let me create a machine to solve cancer. Let me create a machine to do, better things with agentic businesses and SEO, AEO, all those different functions. I think the way that we're thinking about it now is we need to create a machine that knows how to build machines to solve cancer. Right. And so if you ask, like, why do we consider ourselves like meta harness engineers versus like a harness engineer? That's the reason, is that like we're stepping back and looking at our orchestration of the tools and what that kind of continually folds back into, like, what are those primitives? And, from a business perspective, one of the things that I think you're going to find is, and I believe you've probably heard this even from some of the other executives of the companies that have been communicating this, is that the data moat and the process moat for a business is to some degree like eroding or evaporating in some cases. And so you have to think about, what is your new moat? Like, what am I focused on? And the thing that I would be focused on is your evaluations. How do you judge your product? How does the product self-improve, right? One of the cool things that a pattern that I was just using this past week, I've heard of it before, but like I hear of any orchestrations of it, is that I built this app over this 2-day period. And then I connected it to a service that does like quality reviews on apps. Mm-hmm. Right. So you can do user testing basically. And so you give your app, you give a set of questions, and then in an hour you get like 30 different people that have reviewed your app and give you all the feedback and gives you the transcript and gives you the screenshots. And I just plugged all that right into the AI, and the AI literally so in 1 hour, I had a whole focus group complete with the information. And then in the next hour, it was already done. All of the feedback, I had selected what feedback I wanted to take in and what I didn't want to take in. And it was literally done and deployed to production.
Yeah.
And so if you can't like wrap your mind around that form of IP and self-improvement and the machines that can build machines, I think you're going to have a really hard time in this next generation of businesses.
Yeah, it's look, I think to your point, it's easy, a lot easier to create an application within an hour or 2 hours, and many people can do it. Where we found a lot of value for our customers is going really deep in a specific vertical niche. Let's call it staffing. Let's call it payroll. And then let's have an agentic worker that then builds other agentic workers. So that's what you do. You go through a process, you build other agentic workers, and then those ones then start to improve. And then once we put them out into the wild, before we put them out into the wild, Farshay, there's shadow training loops, right? Like, what's going on? Does this exception make sense? And then there's a human in the loop. Once we've got the human from in the loop, we then put the human in the lead. So we move from the human in the loop into the human in the lead, and then that allows companies and businesses to really see what's going on. Because I think it goes back to what we were originally talking about, is you can't use these tools or harness them or leverage the capabilities if you don't know what is actually going on at scale. And sometimes you don't always need to. Not all businesses need that level of depth. So there are certain layers in the stack. Where do you think most businesses are going to shake out in the stack? Like, because you've got, let's take the energy, cooling water layer, and all the way to the application layer. Are there certain areas where you think that there are opportunities that are misunderstood right now that maybe companies and businesses should start to think about more?
I think of it less in the sense of like automation versus non-automation. Like, to me, that's not like the biggest frame of reference. Yes, you're going to have automation, but we've been experiencing that for decades, right? So I don't. That's not the driving factor. I think one of the things I've noticed from folks like in and outside of Microsoft and other companies is that like there's a shape of the mind. The shape it has to be in order to be able to achieve what looks like superhuman capabilities, but to be able to kind of see through it. And so that type of intuition used to be isolated to like really, really high paid consultants that could go in, be there for a short period of time, see something and apply it, and then make that kind of like see wide change. And so here you've got people that are in the shape, their mind is in the right shape to be able to produce things in this era, in this generation. And so the way that I would look at it is that there are businesses, regardless of what they do, they decided to do, that are just in the right shape to follow the process, to build quickly but reliably, right? Because like right now, you just saw that there's agents, like lots of different agents that are being released, whether it's an OpenClaw or Claude agent or a Copilot agent. It doesn't, so not agents everywhere. But if I had to predict the most immediate next step for that, which at some point I'll have to write with you, or you and I'll write together something.
Yeah, we will.
I think it relates to the contract between the human and agentic workforce, right? So like, because right now you have an agent that looks like your delegate, but isn't. So, because like, as you said, the human has to lead those conversations, but what happens when the AI is leading certain conversations? That is a contracted, authorized delegate that can do certain things on your behalf and can't, right? So right now, you experience that in simple technology when you click send on an email.
Sure.
And that button is your delegate. But now we're talking about a non-deterministic machine that is your contracted delegate.
And it feels different. It feels a lot different, right? Because that contracted delegate within that regard, in that context, is then communicating on your behalf.
That's right.
To the outside world. So it leaves your firewall. And so in testing, a lot of the testing let's take that kind of send scenario. One of the things that I was doing, and I still do this this day with my personal Zero, they are called. So Zero is, so our mission is Zero admin. So Zero is in my phone. I talk to Zero. Zero can create emails. Okay. Zero can provide context. But if it's going to be sent, I want it in my drafts first for a review. Okay. Not always, but especially if it's for someone new. So you may get a follow-up, but know that I've seen that follow-up because I value our relationship. I value the conversation. And also I've got a little bit more context to what we were doing in the green room, the types of conversations we have, text messages back and forth. And those delegates don't always have all that context. It's almost like finding the perfect assistant. So we've actually found that leveraging, whether it's an agent or a worker end to end, still just there's some deterministic pieces to this, and there's a lot of data involved, a lot of information involved to get business output. So I think that will evolve as well as time goes on.
It will. And I think one of the things that you're missing from your orchestration machine, by the way, is the ambient part, because if it was, and it did have the ability to be real you. But I just want to tell you for the record, I expect everything to come in handwritten notes from you, Marcus.
Yeah, okay. All right. Every holiday, yeah, okay. I'm going to have to take a picture of one of my handwritten notes, send it to my AI so they can actually create them.
You can write, but you can't hide.
You won't be able to read them, but you'll know them from me.
That's fine. You can't read mine either. You'll just see scribbles. It's fine. Yeah.
It's like, that's the left-handed disease that I have. Oh gosh. But anyway, look, I know we could continue talking, but I also appreciate, and no one will really know this unless I actually say it out loud, but we're kind of deep into Friday afternoon, right? And we've both had a week and a bit. As we change gears, is there anything that you want to make sure that the audience knows? And bearing in mind they're executives, they're people trying to figure things out, they're curious just like us, but what is it that you like to leave people with?
So I think it's the teach me, don't tell me, right, for adults. Don't be afraid to use that term as an adult. Don't be afraid to lean in, roll up your sleeves and actually dive in, right? So in the past, there was something that would block you because it would be too difficult for you to get educated or to get it in your language or to go to a certification program. All of those barriers are gone. And Satya, our CEO, has said this before. He believes that we're on the cusp of every person having the best teacher in the world, the best doctor in the world. So for all of you folks out there that are looking at something that looks like friction, looks hard, enjoy it. Go after it and take it apart in a way that makes it holistically yours.
Yeah, love that, MJ. So friction is the fun. Yes. Have fun with friction and you will continue to grow. You have given me a wealth of insights. So I'm going to actually listen back to this conversation. And then I'm going to write you a handwritten note.
As you should.
from my new handwritten note AEO machine that's going to be sending out handwritten notes at scale. And we'll continue the discussion. And I'm going to take you up on some of those topics. There's some things that we should write about and share. But appreciate you always, MJ. And
of course,
thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me, and love the conversation with you as always. So
talk soon.
Talk to you soon.
If you got value from today's episode, share it with someone in your network, your team, your boss, or that recruiter still stuck in 2015. Be sure to follow the show so you never miss what's next in hiring and AI. Until next time.